intersectional solidarity has to be amongst every community. Not only do we need safe spaces, but we also need our allies.
I love trans people. I just love people, and it's horrible.
The women are here, all the gay folks are here. We're not going anywhere.
LGBT activists and liberal media hosts have finally learned their lesson and are taking a more moderate approach. Just kidding. We've got to catch up with the wonderful ladies over at The View. They just had the cast of Queer Eye, the kind of show with the gay men who do makeovers or something. I'm not a fan, haven't really watched it myself. And the topics turned towards politics, of course, particularly when they spoke with Jonathan Van Ness, who is a gay man who's very feminine, who claims to be non-binary, and is very outspoken about some of these issues. Unfortunately, in this conversation, they echoed a lot of the things that I think have really led the activists astray in their ability to successfully advocate for the LGBT community. Take a listen to this first clip.
And Jonathan, many people in the LGBTQ plus community feel they're being targeted, and they are by this administration. So do us a favor, tell us your message to the community who may feel afraid, who may feel like there's nobody who gets it anymore, and where do I go? What can you say to folks?
I was like, has anyone ever said we need to put the unity back in community?
Yes.
Because I think really on the left, it just with the LGBTQIA plus community, we need to stick together, and we have decades and decades of experience having done this from post-World War II, the Lavender Scare, the AIDS crisis, through the Defense of Marriage Act era, all the way to now. We've stuck together before. We have to do it more than ever before now. We have to stick together. And that's not only our community, but that's intersectional solidarity.
Yes.
Has to be amongst every community. And let, just we got to be together. So that's the biggest thing that I can think of right now.
Yeah.
Not the unironic invocation of intersectionality. Bro, 2016 called and they want their cringe back. The very framing of this question kind of frustrated me because, to be very clear, LGBTQ plus people are not under attack in America under Trump and Republicans. Gays, lesbians, and bisexuals have basically not been affected. There are no policies coming down the pipeline to harm us. Now, there are a lot of changes being made and a lot of pushback to the transgender community and a lot of the transgender activism. Some of this, I think, is just complete common sense, but some of it may go too far and may cause real issues for people. And we can have that conversation without kind of descending into hysterics or incorrectly suggesting that the whole community is under some form of dystopian attack when that's simply not the case. And I just have to disagree with Jonathan's message here. We shouldn't be unifying with the people who want to give kids sex changes and put biologically male criminals into women's prisons. We should be cutting them out and distancing ourselves from them and going back to a normal, moderate position that most Americans can accept. I don't want unity with people who think minors can consent to sex changes. I don't want to be lumped in with them at all. And that's what the LGBT community and liberal media have unfortunately done in the minds of much of the public. And just this rhetorical approach to these issues is giving 2020, it's giving out of date. You'll see with this next clip as well.
No, you guys have made this tour a safe space for the LGBTQ plus community. Tell us about that.
I mean, we need them more than ever. I think this is a time for us to, and not only do we need safe spaces, but we also need our allies to be with us and to show up. And I think we really need a reason to just come together right now. And so we're really excited to do that.
We're all here. All the women are here. All the gay folks are here. All the trans folks. We're here and we're not going anywhere.
Exactly.
Okay, so the worst part of this clip is actually Whoopi. Girl, calm down. Nobody suggested women were going anywhere or should go anywhere, or nobody has any issue with women at all. I don't know what kind of shadow boxing you're doing in your head against an imaginary dystopian society, but no one ever suggested that women or gay people have to go anywhere or get out or aren't allowed anymore or accepted. Like, I genuinely don't know what you're popping off about, babe. Even with trans people, nobody said they have to go anywhere. There are a lot of disputes about what bathrooms they could use, what prisons they should be put in, what sports they should have access to, when and at what age they should be able to medically transition, and we can have a nuanced conversation about all of those things, but let's not act hysterical and pretend like anybody's trying to round them up or deport them or kick them out of the country or anything absurd like that. Because as you'll see later in the show, a lot of people are actually falling for that and actually think that's happening when it's not. Now, as for Jonathan Van Ness, did he really just unironically use the terms safe space and allies? Babe, in 2025, that's the thing. I got nothing against this guy. I just think he's kind of clueless when it comes to the political side of LGBT. But this whole rhetorical approach to LGBT activism really needs to be put back in the closet. Speaking like you're in a gender studies seminar at some woke college somewhere is not ever going to resonate with the majority of Americans, is not going to help get support for this community back on track. But unfortunately, it really seems like these types are just doubling down on that failed approach. And that was made very clear by another segment The View did featuring the actors from a new show, including Laverne Cox, who is transgender and identifies as a transgender woman. She's probably one of the most well-known trans women in terms of the public eye. When they talked about politics rather than their show, which I haven't seen, so I can't really pass judgment on, the conversation was incredibly eye-roll inducing and delulu. It was also just obnoxious and cringeworthy in some ways. Like, take a listen to this first part of the clip.
The transgender community has been heavily targeted in the last few weeks. One example.
Actually, the last several years, but go on.
Yeah, but the last 2.5 weeks have been a doozy.
It's a mess, yeah.
Okay, and
Maybe I'm being petty or pedantic, but did you really have to correct the host and try to clap back? Obviously, Ana Navarro, can't believe I'm defending Ana Navarro, was referring to the actions taken since Trump became president. And that's why she said in the last few weeks. And you're trying to say, actually, it's been the last few years. It's a tiny thing. It's not that consequential, but I just found that very aggravating. But maybe that's my bias as somebody who's been a presenter and been in that situation and finds that kind of thing obnoxious if a guest does it, showing through. I don't know. Here's the real meat of this clip where things got a little unhinged.
one example is that transgender people have been unable to update their gender markers on passports after President Trump's executive order defining sex as either male or female. So how do you respond to that?
Feels, it's really been the past several years for me as a trans person, because this started at the state level many years ago. 26 states banned gender-affirming care for young people. So this has been happening on the state level for many years. So I've been devastated because trans families have had to relocate for many years. Parents have been criminalized. So it's been devastating. Now it's happening on a federal level. So I love trans people. I just love people, and it's horrible.
Is it horrible that you can't give kids sex changes in 25 states? Or is it kind of commonsensical and supported by the evidence and studies? And I'm sorry, but I guess I just don't accept this premise that not being able to incorrectly label your sex on your passport, and I've said I wouldn't mind if they had like sex, male, and then like gender identity, trans woman, or some other box or option to label to make your passport make sense. Because obviously if you look like a woman, but it says sex male, that could cause some confusion. But a trans woman's sex is not female, and putting that on there is incorrect. And these things actually do matter, especially when it comes to being able to sort things like male prisons and female prisons by biology, not identity. If people can just muddy the waters with their paperwork willy-nilly, that becomes hard to do or enforce. And I'm sorry, but nobody's sex is X and non-binary, and taking that away as an option is not dystopian or some attack on people's rights. It's a win for basic sanity and common sense. And look, I understand that some people may, from a place of good faith, earnestly view the debate over child transition differently than I do and not support laws banning it for minors. I don't think they're evil, but I do think they're deeply wrong, and I do think it's a huge mistake for the LGBT community to publicly tie itself with its leaders like this. Like, maybe just keep your takes to yourself, honestly. Tie itself to such a radical thing that Americans across the political spectrum do not support, and I don't think ever will. But of course, why they always have to muddle the waters, and this LGBT activist, Laverne Cox, also had to go on a really hypocritical and frankly inaccurate kind of anti-capitalist socialist rant in there as well. Take a listen to this final clip.
And I think in terms of the administration and all this propaganda and lies, everything he's doing is illegal, by the way, everything. So hopefully it'll be challenged in the courts. But I think at the end of the day, trans people are less than 1% of the population, and trans people are not the reason you can't afford eggs. We're not the reason that you can't afford health care. We're not the reason that you can't buy a house or your rent's too high. Yeah. I think they're focused on the wrong 1%. Ooh. I think the other 1% is the reason for all those things. I'm not going anywhere. I have a TV show.
First and foremost, I don't know about y'all, but I'm not going to be taking my expert legal analysis from random actors on daytime television anytime soon. It may or may not be the case that Trump has the authority or doesn't have the authority to do some of these things, and it should be challenged in court and litigated if it needs to be. But I don't find Laverne Cox popping off about it particularly compelling in either direction. Now, I do agree with what Laverne is saying, that trans people are not to blame for the high price of eggs, for the high price of housing or healthcare. Of course not. That doesn't mean that people are wrong to be concerned about things like biologically male violent criminals being put in women's prisons, the compromising of women's sports, just the erasure of biological sex as a concept under legislation pushed by the Democratic Party. But I do agree that obviously it's not the single biggest issue facing everything, and you shouldn't be blaming them or people like that for the price of eggs. But I don't really think people do that, so it's kind of a non sequitur, but she's not wrong. The eat the rich scapegoat is where she loses me completely, though. First off, it is so hypocritical to see a multimillionaire actor and celebrity talking about rich people are the problem. Babe, look in a mirror, okay? And simply crapping on billionaires or the 1% is not going to stop the socialists from eating you up too. And it's just not true that any of the things she mentioned are because really rich people exist. Housing is so expensive in this country because of massive restrictions on the supply of housing in major urban areas across the country from governments that hamper markets and prevent people from building and offering more apartments, more homes for sale. It has nothing to do with the evil rich big boogeyman, the 1%. Even when they talk about like corporate landlords buying up all the housing, that's not statistically true. It's a tiny, 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 tiny percentage of housing that they own. Same thing with eggs. The reason eggs are so expensive right now is because of a crazy bird flu. It's not because of corporations or corporate greed or anything like that. Healthcare as well is a deeply broken and dysfunctional system, and I certainly think there's a lot of blame to go to some of the pharma companies and health insurance companies, but the system has been broken and distorted by our government, to be clear. It is the furthest thing from a free market or a capitalistic system, and billionaires aren't the reason we have expensive healthcare in America. I just found that talking point so trite and so shallow, and unfortunately kind of emblematic of the broader politicization of the LGBT community and LGBT activism, which shouldn't have anything to do with hating capitalism or being a socialist or being progressive on any other issue, but they've unfortunately conflated LGBT with Democrat progressive views and values on a whole host of issues, and then they're surprised when huge swaths of the public turn against LGBT. Well, it's because you presented it to them as a package with all these other things they don't agree with, which is a terrible way to do single issue advocacy. But what do you guys think of all this? Are you surprised that the media and these prominent LGBT celebrities have learned nothing? I'm not particularly surprised, but I'm still disappointed, to be honest. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I do take the time to read the comments, and I always love hearing what you guys have to say. And do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet.